Okay, welcome back, folks. We're continuing our discussion on H13 and act relating to Medicaid payment rates for home and community-based services. And what we are looking at is taking some testimony from the state's long-term care ombudsman and the staff attorney from Vermont Legal Aid Disability Law Project. So I'm not sure who wants to go first.
I'll go first because.
Yeah.
Good morning. Thank you for taking the time to have me. I am Kylie Kuiper, and I'm the State Long-Term Care Ombudsman at Vermont Legal Aid. I run the Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program. We advocate for individuals who receive long-term care in long-term care facilities and also in the community through the Choices for Care program. I am here in strong support of H113. We hear from Vermonters every day who are unable to access the services they need to stay in their homes. We know that the majority of older Americans would like to age in their homes, and in Vermont, that's becoming more and more difficult. We hear from many Vermonters who end up in long-term care facilities when they wanted to stay in their home because they can't get enough services to stay at home safely. We also hear from more and more Vermonters who end up in facilities out of state because they can't find a long-term care bed in Vermont. And as I'm sure you know, we also hear from Vermonters who end up in the hospitals long-term because they can't find an adequate and safe placement. I'm going to keep my comments short so you can hear from Susan, but I just wanted to outline a few specific cases of people that we worked with that illustrate common problems that we hear all the time. One person we heard from was a long-term girlfriend of a man who had a progressive neurodegenerative disease. She had been caring for him for quite some time and was a government worker and taking leave from the FMLA program. But she was running out of leave. She'd gotten an extension and she was now afraid she was going to lose her job if she took any more leave. But she could not find a safe, adequate placement. She couldn't find enough in-home services. She couldn't find a long-term care bed in the area. And the closest long-term care bed she was able to secure at the time was 6 hours away. And she had heard they had a bad reputation. She had spoken to a nurse who advised her to just leave him at a hospital emergency room. And she spoke to another person who told her that she would be reported to Adult Protective Services if she did that. And so she just felt like she had no options to safely care for this person. Another person that we spoke to or that we worked with was a young man who had had a traumatic brain injury and was in the hospital and then ended up in a long-term care facility in Southern Vermont. He was young and he wanted to return to the community. He really wanted to live in Burlington in a private home and receive services there. But he and his family couldn't arrange for enough services for him to do that safely. So he was stuck living in a long-term care facility where he was not happy with his lifestyle and he was not getting the care that he wanted. I mean, he wasn't getting good quality care. And the last person we spoke to very recently, an intelligent, educated woman who speaks several languages. She had been living in her home happily, except that she was unable to get enough services to live there safely. She ended up suffering a bad fall, going into the hospital. She broke several bones, and now she is in a wheelchair living in a nursing home. She would like nothing more to return to her apartment, but she had to give it up. Her condition is in decline, and she told us that she believes she would still be living at home if she had had adequate services there from the beginning. That's the end of my testimony. Thank you. And I'm going to pass it on to Susan.
Thank you, Pam.
Good morning. For the record, Susan Garcia Nofi, staff attorney, Vermont Legal Aid. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I work in our disability law project, which represents clients who receive or who are attempting to receive home and community-based services. We also operate the Brain Injury and Developmental Disabilities Advocacy Project. This is a pilot program that serves the ombudsman role for people who are receiving services through the developmental disabilities and brain injury programs. We fully support age 13. As lawyers, historically, we've gotten involved in home and community-based services cases where there's been some written decision denying or terminating services, and the person wants our help in an appeal where there's some genuine factual dispute about what the evidence proves, or if there's a legal issue about what the law says the eligibility criteria are. But there's this whole other category of cases now where there is no dispute that the person is eligible for services. And there's been a thorough needs assessment and a budget and a service plan that says they're supposed to receive X number of hours of a particular service or services so that they can live safely and in a healthy way in the community. And they're just not getting the services because the designated and specialized services agencies, or for the people who manage their own care, they just can't fill those positions. And when people don't get the staff, much as the examples that Kylie shared, when people don't get the staff support they need to live at home and to get out into the community, they end up being isolated and they suffer. For individuals who can't be left alone, family members have to make difficult decisions about whether to cut back work, stop working, even though the household needs the income, or sometimes to bring the person to the workplace with them. And when there's no staff to provide respite care that's been budgeted for and is in the plan, family members get burnt out and can't give the individual with the disability what they need. And so that's why we fully support age 13, because it creates a framework and a process to determine what are the appropriate and adequate payment amounts for these services. And so you, the legislature, can make informed decisions about what to appropriate for those services. The only comment about the language in the bill or request, I guess, is that in the section on page 2, and this is in our written testimony as well, with the written definition of what constitutes home and community-based services, the definition explicitly mentions choices for care, and it mentions non-choices for care waiver programs, specifically the brain injury program, but there's no, it doesn't name developmental disability services, even though it's clear from the body of the bill that this was also intended to address services provided through that program. So we would respectfully ask that the definition be modified to specifically name the developmental disability services program under the definition of home and community-based services.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. I think that was just a drafting oversight, because definitely was intended to be there. Can I ask you a question? We heard about yesterday from Ledge Counsel, the Vermont Supreme Court case that a Washington County mental health person who received services and his family in a Human Services Board hearing. Was it Vermont Legal Aid that represented that family?
Yes.
Okay. And it sounds like what I'm hearing you say is that you're getting more and more requests for that kind of representation. I mean, people who aren't receiving the services that they are entitled to in their service plan.
Yeah, that was, and as you know, as you're hearing from constituents and other testimony, that was not an isolated, that's not an isolated problem. So yes.
Yeah. Questions for this witness? Or for Kylie, either one. Go ahead, Rep. Donahue.
Is there any specific data that you have access? I had never focused before on numbers because of not finding nursing home beds going out of state that you reference in your testimony. Do we have any sense of the scope or numbers of that?
I don't think we can provide that kind of data because we don't hear from. We can't say whether we're hearing from a representative subsection.
It's an anecdotal, in other words, that it's happening.
Yeah, we certainly hear from a lot of people or families, but I don't think we can provide accurate data on that. Unfortunately, I think it's a really good question.
And how is your pilot program for essentially ombudsman-like services for people receiving developmental disability and traumatic brain injury services. How is that going?
It is going well because it's a pilot. It is limited to a couple of counties, and my colleague who operates that program is not here, and it's not me, so I might not be the best person to answer that question. But I know she has been doing monitoring visits. You can see on our website on VT Law Help, there's information about the program and how people can reach out to us. And it's a way for folks to, and we have had people contacting us when they have issues with, say, the quality of their services or some problem with the services they're receiving. That's not like a legal issue per se.
Right.
So-
Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions? Thank you both for being here. Did you have something? I think Ann might have one more.
Just. Oh, actually, I found it. The link wasn't working to one of the reports in your, but I found the link.
Okay.
Ignore that distraction.
All right. Thank you both for being here, and we appreciate the work that you do on behalf of Vermonters, and particularly those who need the assistance of our community-based provider system. So they're fortunate to have a strong and robust Vermont legal aid.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work, Ernie. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, so you never know how long the witness is gonna take, so so those witnesses were very succinct, which is very good. And this means that you now have some extra time to work on your budgets. So, yeah.
I do have
Yeah.
a question on that. Has anyone seen the ups and down? Have they done the ups and downs? I mean, I have the budget sheet that was sent, but remember how they do the ones where it shows what's up and what's down versus, has anyone seen that
I
yet?
saw one from Jenny Samuelson. I didn't look at it, but for AHS on house appropriation.
Full of
It's
AHS.
on
Yes.
yours today,
It's on ours today, the ups and down thing.
just the HS one.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and just a reminder to check in, those folks who are liaisons with other committees. To check in with those committees and, because there is stuff happening, like there's stuff happening in energy and digital technology, and there's stuff happening in corrections and institutions, and so check their
Mhm.
websites for the committee that you're responsible for, or if you're on the committees, plural.
And what kind of update will we be providing back to the group? Or when will that happen?
If there's something going on in another committee,
Yeah,
you just let me know
Oh,
that you need a few minutes to update the committee on what you heard and whether or not we might want to schedule those folks in for testimony, separately in our committee, or whether, the update seems sufficient. So just let me know.
okay.
Any other questions? Okay, so you've got a little bit of extra time here for working on your budget, which is it's a big task, so and we have a pretty condensed period of time to do it in, so and also you will have time after floor today to also work on budget. We don't have testimony scheduled after 4, but Lori, if you could just